They know what they are doing, they know how to replace personalities and so on, but it remains unknown how many people are still in the wings, waiting in the wings, and who have the same leverage and the same weight politically, not only inside the country, but also outside. Remember that Ali Larijani was not only a prominent figure internally, but he was an international personality. He had good ties with the Russians, with the Chinese, and he was chief negotiator for the nuclear file in Iran. So, I mean, replacing him is going to be very hard, and it remains to see who else can play a role that is both internally and externally equally important.
And Mohammed, bring us up to speed with the latest on the attacks there in Iraq, in Iran. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there have been some strikes in Bandar Abbas, in a few other areas, and also in Iran, in Tehran yesterday, but not overnight. At least overnight, if anything happened, hasn't yet been reported. But the strikes are ongoing. The Israelis even talked about another assassination strike, but we until now we don't have any details about that.
All right. Mohammed, many thanks indeed. Mohammed Val reporting live from Tehran. Let's bring in Al Jazeera's Zain Basravi, who's live for us now in Dubai. Zain, daily missile strikes on GCC countries. The UAE affected particularly badly. Walk us through the latest.
Well, once again, there have been air raid sirens across the UAE since this morning. They started at around 3 a.m. That familiar glow of defensive fire and interceptions in the night sky over Dubai, loud explosions, and that continued up until this morning. Just a few hours ago, there was another alert, and then the all clear. This morning, the Australian Defence Forces confirming that an Iranian strike impacted an area of the Al Minhad Air Base in the UAE, where the Australian Defence Forces have a long-standing presence. No one was killed or injured, but there was damage to some accommodation blocks and a medical facility there. The barrages continued throughout the morning. Dubai's media office confirming that interceptions were underway, not just missile defenses, but not just air defenses, but also jets were in the air, intercepting drones and what they call loitering munitions. And that's key because debris fall has turned deadly in the UAE recently. At least 2 people killed in the last few days from debris fall in Abu Dhabi. And again this morning, air raid sirens going off again. We saw similar incidents in Qatar, missile defense active this morning. And over the course of Tuesday, 9 ballistic missiles and a number of drone attacks were intercepted. Same story in Saudi Arabia. Just about an hour ago, there was another attempted drone strike on the embassy's district in Riyadh. That's been going on since this morning. And last night, there were drone interceptions in the eastern region of Saudi as well. Kuwait, Bahrain, missile defense is active, sirens going off. So this remains the ground reality, the sort of new normal across cities in the GCC. But it has to be said, the UAE still remains the hardest hit in terms of Iran's retaliation. If Iran's fired, for instance, 3,000 projectiles, it estimated to bring this conflict to a close. How to use diplomacy, political pressure on Iran and the United States so they'll stop shooting at each other and we can look at the way forward. Really what leaders in this region are saying is really what the Qatari minister, the foreign ministry spokesman said a couple of days ago in his briefing. There are solutions to be had, but none of them can be discussed as long as there is still fighting ongoing, as long as both sides are shooting at each other. Now, they definitely are livid with Iran's retaliation. They think it is a misguided short-term strategy. But what they are also doing is bringing pressure to bear on the United States to illustrate to them that this was a bad move to begin with. This was not a war worth starting. And what we are likely to see in coming days is a crescendo of this political diplomatic effort by Arab states who have been one of the biggest losers in this war. You know, they've been getting pot shots taken at them by Iran. Their economies are under enormous pressure because of a war that was of the U.S. making. It was made in the USA. So as long as it carries on, they will illustrate that there is nothing to gain in the long term for any actors in this conflict. So that is likely to be the diplomacy that will be discussed in Riyadh later today.
Al Jazeera's Zain Basravi.
Was smoke seen rising from near the U.S. Embassy. Now, another drone was intercepted near Victoria Base, that U.S. base, near Baghdad International Airport. Again, we understand that that drone came down on the adjacent street and caused a fire, and smoke was seen rising. A fourth one disappeared off radar. So really, there's been no let-up in drone attacks here in the capital, Baghdad. And we could hear through the night the air defenses, the CRAM the system, that rockets, artillery, mortars, that it's designed to intercept those. And it's largely been used now to intercept drones. But what's concerning for authorities is that some of those drones, considering their range, are launched from within Baghdad, the capital city, and that raises serious security questions.
I said, Iraq has reached a deal to use an alternate route to export its crude oil. Tell us about that.
Yes, what this does is bring Iraq's oil supply back onto a market at a time where there is serious strain because of this conflict. Now, Baghdad and Erbil have agreed to use that northern pipeline through the Kurdish semi-autonomous region to Turkey's Ceyhan port. Now, this is important for a few reasons. Since the start of this conflict, Iraq's oil production has dropped drastically from around 4.2 million barrels a day to 1 million barrels a day. And what this does is ease that up. It allows Iraq, because of this oil is now flowing, to recover some of those financial losses and ease that financial pressure. The second thing is there has been tension between the semi-autonomous Kurdish region in the north and Baghdad. Previously, Erbil had refused to allow the oil through because what they said was what Baghdad's restrictions on US dollars and trade amounted to an economic blockade. Now,
figures who might plausibly negotiate an end to this conflict. Does that suggest that diplomacy is no longer part of the strategy here, or was diplomacy never part of it in the first place?
Oh, certainly diplomacy was never part of it from the first place, given that the strikes from the first day and the assassination of the supreme leader happened during the presumed talks, which most of the regional actors witnessed that it was signified in a way that would be progress and a sign of a good progress between both sides, whether US and Israel and Iran. So diplomacy is definitely being eliminated from the picture, which is why the Gulf states is finding this as one of the most challenging times in their contemporary history, given that they heavily relied on advocating for diplomacy to be at the forefront of any crises or potential crises to erupt between Iran and the United States, given that, as we see, the consequences of being the middle region between such a conflict erupting.
It begs the question, though, how aligned Washington and Israel are strategically at this stage. Are they pursuing the same strategic objective here?
They're certainly pursuing very different strategic objectives. We have to also ensure that the U.S. strategy here is very narrowed down and limited divisions when it comes to this war, not just from the Democratic aspect, but also from the Republicans aspect. Many are questioning the legitimacy of this. The U.S. has lost major trust from its regional allies economically and politically. It seems like the U.S. is interested in a minor regime change, which was very evident from the rhetoric presented by President Trump as he was proposing some form of negotiations or acceptance in naming other people and rejecting other people, such as Mushtaq Khamenei. In Israel's case, it is very evident that they're much more interested in dismantling, creating a state destruction within the Islamic Republic, and also ensuring that such a destruction would also translate into a regional chaos.
With Israel now fighting on several fronts, not only is it targeting Iran, but Hezbollah in southern Lebanon are now expanding strikes into Beirut with mass displacement and high civilian casualties. I mean, can Israel do all of this all at once?
Well, since October 7, 2023, we've noticed that Israel has been rationalizing that political development into justifying its existential threat across the region by presenting an existential threat directly to different regional fronts. It does come as a surprise that after Israel pushing the U.S. into this war with Iran, that it decided to further enhance its already existing front with Hezbollah in Lebanon, but it also further indicates and reassures the idea and the notion that Israel is taking an advantage of the escalation of this regional war for its own expansionist agendas.
But does the scale of the displacement that we're seeing currently in Lebanon risk opening a second major front that could reshape the war and stretch Israel too far?
Absolutely, indeed. However, we have to also keep in mind that Hezbollah is also struggling with having a similar domestic support nationally and socially speaking against the Israeli aggression as it used to have in 2006. Hezbollah has also lost a strong regional